welcome to the art of being human. I started off a couple of weeks ago, started talking about panic and anxiety and giving you the different types of anxiety, and I did it for a purpose. And the purpose is that we're now in the middle of a bad pandemic, and we don't know when it's going to stop. But a lot of people are getting really anxious, they're getting depressed, they're getting nervous, some of them are trying to commit suicide. All of the things that we deal with are kind of at a peak level right now, depression, anxiety, and so I want to go over all of this again. I've done it before, so that you can understand where the anxiety comes from and hopefully to help you to deal with it. You know, even children are afraid in this pandemic. You know what they're afraid of? They're afraid that Santa's going to get sick and is not going to be able to deliver any toys this Christmas. You know, and so even children are affected, whatever they conceptualize, and they can't think like an adult. They're children, their brains aren't developed enough. But what they think is that they're fearful. Children are fearful. Their parents are fearful. People are losing their jobs. People are on food lines. They're going to food banks and so forth. And so at any rate, it is a problem for everybody, including children. So we need to go over this again and again, however many times we need to go over it to understand what the anxiety is, what it stems from, how you can stop it, if at all, and how you can deal with it. You know, I can remember my little nephew a few years ago. This is kind of an aside, but a few years ago, one of my little nephews came to me and said, "Auntie Pat, Christmas isn't going to be very good this year. I mean, I heard the story that Santa doesn't have much money, so he's not going to be able to give many gifts this year." Well, you know, he's a little child. He's 4 or 5 years old. So, of course, as a person who believes in always telling children the truth, I told the child the truth. I said I had Santa's secret telephone number, and I had just called him. And he had assured me that he had new shipments of cardboard and paint and metal and things like that, anything that you would need to build toys with, and that no child should worry about not having enough because he had plenty of toys to give to everybody. Well, he was so relieved. Now, you're talking about a little child, you know, so children are affected when things go wrong. And so we got him over that hump. And then I talked with his mother, and I said, you know, this is a situation, and this is what he's afraid of. And then we went shopping, and there was no problem. Santa left plenty of toys that particular Christmas. So these children today are afraid that they're not going to get their toys, they're not going to get anything for Christmas, Santa's not going to be able to fly his reindeer. You know, he's not going to be able to do any of those things. He might get sick and there might not be a Christmas. So I feel terrible for children because they don't have a full understanding of what's going on, but they understand some of the little facts that apply to them. And it's always on the negative. So I start going through the types of anxiety. I want to go just review that and continue with that because we didn't finish with it last time. But one of the major types of anxiety is called generalized anxiety disorder. GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, and that's a chronic high anxiety, not attributable to any specific event. The person is just nervous and anxious and afraid, but they can't say this is the reason, that is the reason. Sometimes just life by itself gets to be too much for people and they get nervous. Other times it could be something wrong with their hormones, something wrong with their biochemistry. It's not always attributed to something going on in society. You see, anxiety has many causes, and there are different types of anxiety, and they kind of blend into one. But I went over that last time. Then we talked about phobias, which is an irrational fear of an object or a situation that doesn't present a danger. You know, I saw on television this little boy. He was about 6, and he had been bitten by a dog. And this would be a simple phobia. He's afraid of dogs because they bite. He got bit, and he had to have facial surgery. This was a serious bite on his face. And the face is special because it's so close to who we are. And so if something is wrong with the face, it affects us emotionally maybe deeper than if something happened to another part of our body. And so he ended up by having to have facial surgery because of this bite. So he was afraid of dogs, as he would naturally be. It's a simple phobia. One thing leads to another thing. A leads into B. And so they bought him a dog, a puppy, and it showed on television this little doodle dog, a very small doodle dog, just as sweet as it can be, and he fell in love with this dog, and his fears of dogs went away. My parents did the same thing for my sister. My sister was afraid of dogs. We were going to be going into the first grade, and she was afraid of every dog on the street. She'd never been bitten. We don't know why she was afraid, but of course I love dogs, and she was afraid of them. We were twins. We were both going into the first grade together. So they bought us a pet, a family pet. They bought us a Springer Spaniel, one of my favorite kinds of dogs. They're just beautiful, and they have a wonderful personality. And of course, everybody fell in love with this dog, this puppy, immediately. And then her fears were gone. They took care of it for some reason, and she was now not afraid of dogs, and now she actually loves dogs. They're her favorite pet. She just loves them. She kind of walks dogs all around the neighborhood. If they want to have a sitter for a dog, they call on her. So it was an effective kind of treatment. Now, some phobias can get to be very complex, and it's not based on this led to this, led to this. It can be symbolic of many things in a person's life, and it centers around something that's not going to be hurtful, but is kind of a symbol of all of the anxiety that the person is suffering from. And as a result of that, they become afraid of what that means. They become afraid of what that symbol is. Usually with a phobia, if you're not in the presence of what you are afraid of, you don't have any fear. You're afraid of a specific thing, and the only time you're afraid is when you're in the presence of that thing you are afraid of. Well, what if it's water that you're afraid of? You can become phobic about anything. What if it's water and you're at the beach? You don't dare to go in the water. A shark might get you. It has it for some people. You know, or what if it's a bridge? You can't go over a bridge and drive over a bridge. You might fall off the bridge. The bridge might collapse. Something might happen. And that becomes a very complex phobia that has to be desensitized. But treatment is available for that. If you're suffering from a phobia, you can get help with it. Then, of course, the panic disorder is overwhelming anxiety, sudden, unexpected. It's like a panic attack. There it is. All of a sudden you are so panicked you can't control yourself. You hate it, but you can't stop it. You don't know why it's there. Suddenly you are absolutely terrified. Now, there's no reason that you can point out of what you're terrified of. You just feel a sense of terror. And when that terror hits, it is so strong. It has a life of its own. You don't want to go into a grocery store to buy groceries. You might get that terror anywhere. When panic strikes, when a panic disorder strikes, it strikes and you don't know where it came from. It appears to come out of the blue. Suddenly you are terrified out of your wits and you don't know why. If you're in a store, you want to get out of the store. Just go someplace to calm down, you know, and it's very difficult to understand what it's coming from. And I've told you various stories about it and people that I've worked with that have had this kind of terror, not knowing where it was, but suddenly screaming, suddenly running away because they couldn't handle the terror. It's very, very hard, and it's overwhelming and when it happens. But you know, you have to remember that there's no such thing as a symptom without a cause. Something caused it. The person who's experiencing it doesn't necessarily know what caused it. But what they do is they learn to be afraid. They learn to be afraid that the fear is going to come back. You know, I'm afraid of fear. I have fear, I'm afraid of fear, so therefore I don't go out of my house. I don't go to the grocery store. I don't go walks by a beach or something because I'm so afraid and I'm fearful that that's going to come. What if I'm sitting in a theater and I'm watching a show or going to the movies and all of a sudden that hits? I've got to find a place to get out of there. So I check all of the doors, I check where the exits are, and are the exits locked? Well, they shouldn't be, because what if there was a fire? You'd have to get out of an exit. And so therefore, all of this preparatory work is done. I won't go to this place if I can't find a way out of it if I get my fear. I won't do this, I won't do that, I won't leave my house. I'm going to stay in my house. It's the most comfortable place I can be. If the fear hits, that I can check things. I can check that the stove's not burning. I can check that everything's all right. And then I just have to suffer it out until it's done. So you can see how badly that is, how badly suffering, a cause of suffering that is. But that would be the panic disorder. Now, there is such a thing as cold emotion. I hadn't mentioned that before. Cold emotion is when you're very jittery and you're very nervous. You're not sure why, but it's not at the level of panic. You're not trying to get away from something, you're just quite nervous. And a lot of times it's caused by medication. I can remember when I had a serious cold and the doctor gave me medication, I took a pill and all of a sudden I'm nervous. And I knew that there was no reason to be, it's just a pill. But I just knew that it was caused by that medication. Some medications you can react to by having a cold emotion. You have nervousness, you have anxiety, and it's a result of something that your medication is doing to your body. Now, there are some medications that can make you high, and you're not nervous, and you feel just absolutely wonderful, and it's due to the medication as well. You need to watch when you take medication what kind of side effects you get from it. Nervousness and cold emotion can be one side effect. Feeling too good and euphoric can be another kind of reaction that you can get to some kinds of medication. A lot of medications don't have any influence on your emotions at all, but it's something that you need to know. They might make you drowsy instead, or they might make you feel, anxious or not anxious. It may be that you just feel better on them. It may feel a little tired. Whatever it is, watch for side effects on medication, because it's important that you know that. Then, of course, there's the obsessive-compulsive disorder. People who are obsessive-compulsive develop different kinds of behavior. And what's going on is this. They have certain thoughts. They may not even be aware of what their thought structures are, but they have certain thoughts. And these thoughts are problematic to them and cause them anxiety. What the body does is to compensate by having ritualistic behavior in an attempt to control the thought process. It's your body's response to trying to control the thought process. So you're afraid. So what do? Maybe you wash your hands 15 times every minute. Maybe you, as you're walking on the sidewalk, you only put your right foot on a crack. Supposing there are cracks in the sidewalk where they've laid cement and there's cracks between them, you only put your right foot over the crack. Or there's ritualistic behavior. You breathe so many times per minute. You decide to do certain things. You may decide to not only wash your hands, you may check the stove. Well, what if the stove isn't on? What if the stove is on? What if I forgot to turn off the stove? What if I forgot to lock the doors in my apartment? What if I left without making sure that the oven was off? And you worry incessantly about that. A ritualistic behavior would be, I've got to go back and check it out, just in case, just in case I left it on. I was driving a friend of mine to the coast from this area, and we got about 30 miles in. I mean, it was a fairly long trip. It was going to be like at least a 2-hour drive. And she said, I don't remember locking my car. I'd picked her up and she'd left her car somewhere where it would be safe, and she thought she locked up her car, but she wasn't sure that she locked her car. We ended up by going back 30 miles so she could check her car, which was locked. She remembered that she locked it. I know sometimes if you're in that kind of behavior, your worst fear is that you forgot to do something that you should have done, and as a result of that, a calamity occurs. You forgot to lock the doors of your apartment, so therefore somebody comes in and steals from you. You forgot to turn off the oven. You know, I think some of the best ways of handling it is to talk to yourself. All right, I've turned off the oven. I'm going to remember that. I have turned off the oven. And then when I leave, if I worry about the oven, I'm going to remind myself that I told myself that I turned off the oven, you know? Or the keys to my apartment. Where did I leave the keys? Where did I leave my check? Where did I do this? When did I do that? And it gets to be a cycle that's very hard to change because there's a fear level that's connected with that. And the fear is if you didn't do something right, or if you missed something that you normally would do, that some kind of a crisis is going to develop. If you forgot to turn off the oven, did I turn off the oven? I baked something this morning. Did I turn it off? It'll cause a fire. You know, it'll cause a fire, and it'll be my fault because of the fire, because I did not double check and make sure that that oven was off before I left. So you talk to yourself, I've just turned off the oven. If you want to, write a note. I turned off the oven and date it. And then when the fear comes, I don't know if I turned off the oven. Wait a minute, I wrote a note to myself, and that'll help you to remember that you did. You know, there's nothing worse than getting halfway to somewhere and then realizing that you're not sure that your stove is off, or you're not sure that your doors are locked. So you develop these things, you develop these fears and rituals in that kind of a problem that you have. You develop rituals to cover yourself, to control the thought process, because you're not really controlling the thought process, so you're substituting. Yeah, if I walk down the street and the street has a crack between all of the cement blocks of the sidewalk, I put my left foot on that crack, and then my right foot goes ahead of it. I only use my left foot to cover the crack when I get to it. Only the left foot, not the right foot. And they develop these really elaborate things to control their thought processes, which are negative. Now, in some cases, it might be counting. I have to count to 50 every time I fear that the oven isn't off. I have to count to 50. I have to change my clothes, take another shower, get ready and put my clothes back on, and then if the fear comes, I have to do it all again. I can't make progress in whatever I'm doing because I'm always changing my clothes and taking a shower and changing my clothes and taking a shower, because I'm fearful that if I don't do those things, that something's going to go wrong in my life. You know, something's going to go wrong. I will have done something I wasn't supposed to do. I will not have done something that I should have done, and on and on and on it goes. So you see, it's a bad fear. There are different degrees of it. Some people get over it pretty well. It doesn't have to be devastating. But if it's a really serious problem, some people are just, they can't go anywhere. They can't do anything because they're so plagued with it. And so that's a very difficult fear to get over. So that is obsessive compulsive. And then, of course, you have your post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Now, what happens in PTSD is you have a disturbance due to something either that you've been involved with or something that you've seen. You can get PTSD from something that you've seen, some kind of abuse that you've seen, some kind of an accident that you've seen. Or you can get PTSD because you were in an accident or you were abused. Either you experienced it in some way, or you saw it, and it happened maybe to somebody else, but you saw it, and you can't unthink it. And so therefore it gives you stress. It's a post-traumatic stress. And some of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress are these. You get flashbacks, nightmares, emotional numbing. That is, you're kind of in a fog, you're kind of in a haze. Poor social relations, vulnerability, alienation, anxiety, anger, guilt, dissociation. Dissociation is when you kind of phase out and you're kind of in a different space. Like if you're daydreaming or something like that. That's like a mild form of dissociation. And so you have all of these symptoms. People who have been to war, soldiers come back with it, with PTSD. They've seen too much, they've done too much, and it just has affected them too much. And so they get the post-traumatic stress. It can be very, very serious. When they come back from war, they're not the same people as when they left. Excuse me. So I'm going to close this here, and I'll go on with PTSD because I want to say more about it, and then we'll get to other kinds of anxiety. So I'll close it here, and we'll continue with this next time. Please join me then.